Just laying in bed right now. Why not? It's I don't know what's melting quicker right now, the snot out my nose or the snow on the ground. Thankfully, we only got about 7.5 inches of snow, so that's not too bad. That'll go soon. Thankfully, I'm just happy really needed the precipitation here, and that's really going to help. With the recharging the groundwater and all that, and we've been having a little bit of a drought here. Since the end of fall, so that's changing a little bit, thank God, and all that good stuff. But yeah, there's a lot going on right now. Obviously, there's a Fed meeting going on today, the first one of 2026. And that'll be pretty interesting. Every time the Fed meets, it's not every month, but it's a certain amount of times per year. Typically, the Tuesday of that week, they'll meet, they'll do all that stuff. And then on Wednesday at usually 2 or 2:30 p.m. Eastern, the Fed chair will do a speech and take questions from reporters also. So what's interesting about this Fed meeting is that it's the usual. He'll give his usual spiel, and the markets are going to move, based on if he's hawkish or dovish or whatever. But that's really not what's going to move markets as much as I think the questions reporters are going to be asking Powell about the criminal investigation into, uh, you know, the Fed's renovation and monetary allocation for that of their headquarters in Washington, D.C. And I think, if Powell's cagey with that, I think, I don't know, if he's cagey about it, that may sway markets in one direction. And if he's open about it, that may sway markets in another direction. Also, it's really novel time because we're on the verge of potentially another government shutdown, which is interesting. And then we're also in the midst of, this historic silver price breakout. And as more people are becoming aware of what's going on with the exchange in Shanghai and the COMEX in Chicago and the FUCK going on with all that, I think people, even people who are not into precious metals, are kind of becoming interested in that, and seeing kind of the phrase being torn, of the financial system. And I always say, a lot of people think that, the people who run everything, they're going to be, they're going to be exposed. That's not what's going on here. What's going on is a manufactured, controlled demolition of the old system and a kind of slow but sturdy transition to the new system. So don't think for 1 second, there's a lot of people, a lot of silver stackers and gold bugs out there who think, oh, hallelujah, the system is falling and the elites, the bankers are going to be put up on pedestals with, rope, in the public square. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. The new system that's coming is going to be one that's got their hallmark on it, just like this one. Nothing's changing. And it's also why I kind of laugh at silver and gold stackers, of which I am one. They talk about, how crypto's going to zero, the use case for crypto is zero, and they're wrong because obviously, the new system we're going to have is going to be a crypto system, but it's going to be like a stablecoin type system where it's backed by gold and silver, so it's going to be very novel and very interesting. Now, it's funny because they say crypto is going to go to zero, but actually what may happen is gold and silver may go to zero eventually, because you have to think about this. I think everything may go to zero in our traditional terms of thinking in terms of fiat currency. Everything's going to go to zero perhaps, because if the new financial system is based off gold and silver and crypto, well, those are no longer retail investments, right? Imagine if the United States dollar was like a natural resource and it was worth something, and it was worth such and such, and then it was made the currency, and then all of a sudden it's worth nothing because there's no retail value. That's the interesting thing I think may happen with gold, silver, and crypto. It's something that nobody's talking about. but I actually think it may happen. There's a lot of variables in regard to that, and nobody really knows what's going to happen. But it's something I think about, and it's something that I see not a lot of people thinking about, which is kind of troubling. There's a lot of stupid people out there. You know, there's a lot of stupid crypto people. There's a lot of stupid precious metals people. A lot of really gullible people. You know, it doesn't take a genius to go buy some shiny rocks. It doesn't take a genius to go buy some Bitcoin. All it does is take some currency. That's it. So people don't have to be bright to do these things. Now, to understand the why and wherefore of when you're buying and the cycle and everything, yeah, that does take some brains, or it could take some luck. But ultimately, at where we are in the stage of this old system kind of evanescing into the new system, there is value in holding gold, silver, and crypto. And so I'm not one of those people. I've never been a silver or gold bug at the expense of everything else. I always recommend, hey, you know, if you can swing it, gold, silver, maybe platinum and palladium, maybe some copper, rhodium, osmium, whatever, you know, and then some cash, sure. And then some crypto too. Why not? You know, I mean, I'll straight up, you know, I have crypto. I have stuff that I sold. I have stuff that I didn't sell. And I have no problem waiting and seeing what happens. And the thing with me with crypto is that I never bought crypto in my life. Crypto was something that was always either gifted to me or it was given to me as payment for a good or service that I accepted, you know? So to me, it doesn't really matter all that much. It's you kind of put these eggs in different baskets and see what happens. But I am definitely going to be watching the Fed speech at 1:30 p.m. Central today, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. I think it's going to be really interesting. But you know, not only are people going to be looking at what Powell is saying, they're going to be looking at how he's saying it and all the mannerisms, and that really is going to move markets. I really think we're going to see, and I know we're going to see volatility because right now in the gold and silver market this morning, really nothing's happening. It's a very tight band of crabbing, which is strange because the past 2 days, especially with silver, has been incredibly volatile. You know, gold not so much. Gold has shot up. You know, so nobody knows what's going to happen. I think actually what's going to be even more interesting than watching gold and silver is going to be watching the price of Bitcoin. Traditionally speaking, if the Fed were to hold rates steady, one would expect that Bitcoin would fall. Or if the Fed were to lower rates by 25 basis points, then maybe Bitcoin would rise. But also, traditionally, when we have government shutdowns, Bitcoin also falls too, as was evidenced this fall. So we don't really know what's going to happen, and anybody who says they know is a liar. But at the same time, it's really novel territory. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. So it's going to be fun to watch. And I think ultimately there's going to be some big movement this afternoon. You know, we'll see. I don't know. I think based off the people who are contacting me about investing in gold and silver, there's a lot of people who don't really know what to do right now, and that's the vibe I'm getting. Is there's people who have cash on the sidelines. They don't really know what to do with it or how to allocate it, and they're scared. And the interesting thing to me is I never see things that way. I always see it as, you know, that your cash is being disavowed of its value every day. So why not put it into some sort of vehicle or some sort of safe haven? You know what I mean? I mean, that's the way I see gold and silver. That's the way I see real estate. You know, a lot of people go, oh, that property is expensive. And I say, in what? In what terms? You know, because let's say you buy a property that's $200,000. Well, yeah, it hurts to part with that $200,000 in cash, but you're stowing that $200,000 in cash into a very sturdy asset that's always been recognized as an asset. And if you need to liquidate it later, it may take some time, but you can liquidate it, and it's pretty much assured you're going to get what you paid for it, or maybe more. So I never really understood this. This is kind of a young person's quandary of not understanding that you're not losing when you buy assets, you're winning. It's just, you know, you have to have the capital necessary to invest in something that's pretty much not very liquid. You know, like real estate is not liquid. You know, it takes time to sell, it takes time to buy. Precious metals are pretty liquid. However, when we get into a time like this, where the price action is all over the place, sometimes it's hard to sell, especially in volume, because you have to sell to somebody who has the capital to pay you out in fiat currency. That's why when you have metals, let's say you want to sell your metals right now. I mean, the best way to do it is to straight up trade it for what you really want. Now, it'd be great if you could walk into a dealership and be like, hey, I want this car. I'll give you this many ounces of silver. They're going to make you convert it, unfortunately. But I've seen instances where you can straight up trade silver for land, you know, and you don't always have to convert to cash. Now, the title company's not going to like it. You know, they're not going to be a fan of that, but it is doable. So, I mean, you know, precious metals are more liquid than real estate, but at the end of the day, it's always a risk. I don't know. And talking about this stuff is kind of funny because most of you are poor or you know are just have cash and not much of anything else. So it's all kind of a pipe dream to a lot of you. It doesn't really mean much to many of you, but to some of the people who actually do have something that's solid, that's not, you know, fiat currency. This is the stuff that's going through their mind right now. It's the stuff that they want to know. Because right now, the play is to not lose your working capital. A lot of people are really worried about the future, and you know that's why a lot of people are sitting in cash right now still because they're scared. Like, well, I don't want to invest at all-time highs and lose, you know, and that's why I think a lot of people are going to be wiped out in terms of their capital, you know, because they're not allocating it. They're too scared. Now, am I saying you should buy Nvidia right now? No. Or Palantir? Not really. You know, obviously, you know, buying gold and silver right now is scary to people, you know, but everybody knows scared money don't make money. So, I mean, you got to kind of get off the fence line and do something at some point in time, because if you don't, you're going to realize that you're losing just by the indecisiveness. You know, so even I had somebody contact me the other day. They were asking me, well, should I invest in crypto or precious metals? And I said, well, what is your game plan? What is your end goal? And they said, well, I'm trying to preserve my wealth. I said, okay, if you're trying to preserve your wealth, then, you know, gold is really the sine qua non, you know, to speak Latin. Gold is where you want to go if you want to preserve your wealth. I mean, the problem is, are there many people out here who want to pay the price for an ounce of gold? Because you got to understand, last time I checked, an ounce of gold was I don't know, $5,280 an ounce. And you have to understand there's also a premium too. So, you know, I mean, typically when I was buying gold, and I haven't bought gold in years, you know, there was typically the premium was about, you know, $100 per ounce or 1%. Back when I was buying gold, gold was about, you know, $1,200 an ounce up to $1,600 an ounce. Typically, the premium for an ounce of gold was about $100. You know, they just be cool about it and just, you know, instead of doing 1%, do $100. Nowadays, I honestly don't know how it goes. I was going to talk to my local guy over here, my local coin shop guy over in Arkansas, and talk to him about what he's doing now with premiums. Silver's pretty straightforward. Gold is, you know, gold's so dang expensive now. And then the problem is if you buy fractional pieces of gold, the premiums are even higher. If you say buy, you know, a quarter of an ounce or half an ounce, you know. So it's problematic. And it's really expensive. But however, you know, the gold silver ratio last time I checked was about 46, which is low for what it's been for, you know, years. So, you know, some people are thinking, well, go buy silver. It's expensive, yes, but you know, the run-up potential of the price of silver is greater than that of gold in terms of velocity, and so then you can exchange that silver for gold down the road. and everybody's got different idea of when to exchange silver for gold depending on the ratio. For me personally, I own gold and silver. I'm not too interested in exchanging silver for gold. I think they both have their place. Um, but for me, I would not exchange silver for gold until the ratio was about 25 ounces of silver per ounce of gold or lower. That's when I would think about it. But honestly, I probably wouldn't do it. And the reason is I hold silver because silver is a vehicle for me with the price action recently to buy more land. Um, so that's what silver is valuable for me. I'm not interested in stowing any away for savings. That's what I have gold for. So silver's use is different for me than it would be for other people. I understand if you're a person who owns only silver and no gold, I understand that you would be interested in exchanging. And I've gotten that question from people before, what ratio should I swing for? And honestly, for people like that, I tell them if you got enough silver, you can start exchanging right now with the ratio being 45 to 1. Why not? I mean, why not go get your first ounce of gold, for 45 ounces of silver? That's not bad. Now, if you recently bought silver at these levels, I don't know. But if you're a person like me who bought silver during the pandemic, primarily when it was $10 to $20 an ounce, then yeah, go exchange. You're winning. And then just pretend, the good thing about having gold is you just pretend you don't even own it. You forget. And it's just like a hidden savings account. So that's something to think about. But there's so many different strategies to this, and that's why when people contact me privately, we go into kind of what their goals are and their finance and all stuff like that. But I've been in the precious metals trade, I guess if you could call it that, for about 17 years at this point. So I've seen a lot, man. Like I got into it about 2009. Um, so I saw what was going on during the bubble in 2011, 2012. I lived in New York City at the time, so I was, down in the Diamond District in Midtown Manhattan all the time. I saw the proliferation of We Buy Gold shops and blah blah blah, and the kiosks, in the malls and stuff like that. And so I remember seeing that, and I think the reason why I knew to buy before and during COVID was because I saw that run up, and I saw all that craziness and all the frenzy. You know, People don't remember back in 2011, you know how women used to have Tupperware parties? Women were having gold parties and silver parties. It was crazy. Um, but I think people also forget too, because I was buying silver before the pandemic. I know, when GME, when GameStop was going on, people were talking about silver, the silver squeeze, and that's when a lot of people got into it. But I was buying silver, man. I bought a lot of silver back in 2017 after I sold my first property that I built. I built a cabin out near Joshua Tree, California, and I took those proceeds and I put it almost all into silver. And back then, man, I think silver was, gosh, about $20 an ounce. I don't remember paying. I had a guy in Palm Springs I bought most of my silver from back then. I don't remember with the premium paying any more than 21 or 22 bucks an ounce. So, knowing that when the pandemic happened and everything just crashed, in March or April of 2020, to me, I was like, man, this is great. I got cash. I'm going to go spend it. And I was talking to my mom on the phone the other day because even the normies are hearing about silver and gold now. And I remember during the pandemic, I actually went to visit my parents. And every single day, I told my mom, I'm like, hey, can we go to the post office? I got to go get a money order for, silver gold bull or SD bullion or monument metals. And my mom was like, yeah, sure. We'll go on the way to wherever we were going. And I talked to her the other day. I said, you remember those days when I was buying all that? She said, yeah. And I said, well, this is why you can know with your own eyes to trust me. Because look, who else was doing that at that time? Nobody, you know? But then again, everything was on sale back then too. Stocks were on sale, everything. And, if you were immune to the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, the FUD, you made out like a bandit. And that was the cool thing about the pandemic, man. I mean, I I was telling a friend the other day, I loved COVID. I had absolute blast. And I'm not making light of people who got sick or anything like that at all. I don't mean it in that way. I mean, I actually literally had fun throughout the whole pandemic. I had a blast. And part of it was economically, was seeing the crash and recognizing it for what it was, and being able to go in and go, okay, now's the time to buy. Now's the time to buy. That's why when people contact me nowadays, I understand why a lot of people want to maintain a cash position and a hefty cash position. But again, you got to know when to come off that cash position and allocate, because otherwise you're going to get screwed, dude. And I'm not saying I'm any better. I mean, over the course of time, I've of course lost probably a decent amount of purchasing power just by sitting in cash. But again, that's a young person's mistake, and it's a mistake I made too. Is when you're younger, you just accrue cash and you feel like you're a baller. Like, yeah, oh, I got $400,000. Oh, I got this or that, or But the problem is, like anything else, it's hard to make the cash, and that's one of the biggest esoteric problems for people right now. Is since it's so hard to make cash, people end up clinging to it. Whereas that's only the first half of the equation. You got to make the cash, and then you got to put it into something. You got to invest in something that holds value, or invest in yourself. If you're detailing vehicles, and yeah, go get some cash and then go upgrade your tools, or your advertising, or your space, if you have an office space or whatever. All that stuff makes sense. But that's where people get hemmed in. That's where people get scared. And that's a lot of the consultations I do with people who are getting into business or getting into investing. It's always the same thing. It's just getting them over that initial fear of spending cash, because cash is meant to be spent. Cash is a hot potato. It's liquidity. It's liquid for a reason. You're supposed to keep it moving. Now, I understand it. I always say, if you're looking to buy something big, like a piece of land, and you're buying it with cash, then yes, of course, you're going to accrue a big amount of cash and you're going to sit on it. But again, sometimes people fall into this trap too. They save a whole bunch of cash for a big purchase, and then they start getting cold feet. They start getting scared. Oh, well, should I spend the cash? Uh, I tell people all the time, I bought this 25-acre piece of land out here. I spent well over $100,000 in cash buying it. And yeah, was it a little scary? Of course. I mean, my last house, I spent $96,000 in cash on that. And that was scary too. Back in 2020, that was freaking scary. But I can confidently say that every single time I've made a scary financial decision like that, it's always paid off. And the fear eventually evaporates, and you realize, again, you stop thinking like a dummy, and you say to yourself, I didn't lose any cash. I just took that fickle cash where the value is not dependable, and I put it into an asset where it is dependable and appreciable also. So it's just something to think about. I don't know. And like I said, I very rarely do these live streams anymore. I don't really have anything to talk about. I'm just spitballing, and that's what it is. So if you got questions, you can leave them in the chat. You can super chat your questions, if you want. Always sweetens the pot a little bit if you got questions, or you can hit me up, thesoftspoken@gmail.com. Like I say, I mean, you don't have to go to me for advice or anything. I don't really mind. You can if you want to. The only reason I bring it up is because this is literally a field that I've been in for such a long time. So I feel like I got some wisdom to share, perhaps. I mean, I'll say it this way: I certainly have not lost purchasing power by investing in precious metals at all. It's been quite the opposite. It's really been a slingshot upwards in value. And there's a lot of people who don't know nothing about it, and there's a lot of people who don't trust baby boomers to to educate them, and I wouldn't blame them for that. I mean, there was no boomer who taught me. I just kind of went into it and I learned just by doing it. I didn't know anything in the beginning, and I've got my strategies too. Some people are numismatists. They're into buying, graded coins and proofs, and misprinted coins, and ancient coins and all that stuff. I've never been into that. Do I own some of that? Of course, but I never really been into it. And so people who are into numismatics, they can contact me too. I know quite a bit about it. It's just not really my thing. I really never got a hard on for that sort of thing. For me, my strategy has always been just get as much weight as you can. And so I know nobody wants to hear that, like, stacking a whole bunch of, generic Buffalo silver rounds, but who gives a crap, because when you go to sell them, if you do go to sell them, it don't make a difference. You might get a little bit more money for an American Silver Eagle or, a Maple Leaf or a Kookaburra or a Panda or whatever, sure, because those are government minted coins. But at the end of the day, if you're just trying to stack weight in terms of precious metals, why not just get generic rounds, as many of them as you can, or rounds from mints you like a lot of people like Sunshine Mint because of the security feature on their 1 ounce rounds or their 10 ounce bars. There are certain manufacturers people like Engelhard or Johnson and Matthey. You know, um, there's so many different ways you can go about it, and everybody's got their favorites. A lot of newbies, they like getting into kind of like the coins that have cool graphics, or they're colored. Some people like toning and milk spots and stuff like that. Actually, some silver, when it tones, it can kind of develop like a rainbow type of hue. Some people like that. I always caution people who are just getting started, especially with the price being so expensive. I wouldn't get into all the crazy meme coins and, with all the nice looking graphics. I get it. It's nice to fondle those coins. It's nice to look at them, but you're really paying a huge premium. And nowadays, with the price being so high, who would want to pay an extra premium on top of, the price skyrocketing? It's just not worth it to me. Um, when the spot price is, 100, I don't know, 150, $115 or whatever. Why would you want to pay $200 for a coin that, has a picture of Homer Simpson on it? I don't see the value personally. I know some people do, whatever. Yeah, that's fine. I just never saw it. I don't have very many coins like that. If any, if anything, if you're going to spend a little bit more, then get yourself some government minted coins. American Silver Eagles are always pretty much like the most trusted, especially in the U.S. And if you really got money like that, go get a monster box. I'm not going to say whether I have any of those or not, but monster boxes are something worth looking into if you want to buy weight. Now, I remember back when a monster box had cost you $10,000. I don't know what they cost now. I want to say they're over 50 grand. If I had to do the math in my head, buying a monster box of American Silver Eagle is probably going to cost you $60,000 now. If maybe a little less. I don't know, 55, 60 grand. Yeah, I remember back in 2017 or so. Yeah, you get a monster box for about $10 or $11,000. And back then, people were like, "Oh God, that's pricey." I remember my my guy I'd go to at the local coin shop in Palm Springs. He had a monster box, and it was sitting on the shelf for a little bit. And I was thinking about buying it, but even back then, I was like, "Damn, dude! Like, I don't know if I want to pay all that." So, but again, that's just a preference that people have to think about for themselves, if that's something they want to do or not. Everybody's got a different strategy in terms of stacking. The other thing too is you want to start stacking weight. I mean, you have to start thinking about security, about where are you going to store these things. Are you going to store them in a safety deposit box in a bank? Depending on the laws in your state. I mean, they could seize that, depending on, a variety of circumstances. Are you going to, keep it in your house? Are you going to get a safe? What type of safe? Most people, they think getting a residential security container or a fireproof safe is going to save them. Well, maybe against a dummy. But no, if you want a real good safe, and I've got one, I have a TL30 safe. If you don't know what that is, look it up. That's serious money. You're going to be spending thousands But at the end of the day, ain't nobody gonna get in your safe, unless they really know what they're doing. And so what TL30 means is for a person who really knows what they're doing, they can get in that safe in 30 minutes. TL15, they can get in that safe in 15 minutes if they really know what they're doing. A lot of people don't understand cheapo safes. A lot of them are actually foam plated in thin gauge sheet metal, right? You can get in most of these crappy safes you can buy at Harbor Freight or Home Depot with an angle grinder and a metal cutting wheel. It's really not that hard. So in terms of safes, if you're going to buy a safe, you better get a good one, you know. And usually these TL15 or TL30 safes they also are fireproof up to a couple hours, which is pretty good. Or, I mean, there's even better safes, but those safes are going to cost you in the tens of thousands of dollars. And then you got to think about, you got to think about space, right? I mean, if you're like me and you've got a house with a concrete slab foundation, you got something to put that on, to mount it on, bolt it down to. But a lot also, I mean, like my safe, my TL30 safe weighs over 1,000 pounds with nothing in it. So again, that takes away somebody actually walking away with your safe, which is good. And then it just comes down to, making it where it's not feasible for a person to try to even crack it. And, you got to understand the average opportunist is, like a tweaker, kind of. They're not going to get in your safe if you got a really good one like that. Now, if somebody has been watching you and they're astute, maybe some sort of criminal organization or whatever, yeah, they might be able to get in your safe. But you got to think of the numbers, you know what I mean? You're going to securitize your house with cameras and firearms, and you have your safe. And maybe if you're really thinking, you're going to put that TL15 or TL30 safe within a safe room, right? Now, that safe room may be an indoor tornado shelter, or it may be a concrete block room, reinforced with rebar. There are many ways to do this. But, if you're going to be investing thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more in precious metals, then you got to make sure that those precious metals are going to remain yours. I back in the past, I had some of my stuff stolen. Back about 11 years ago. Lost a little bit. You charge it to the game. That's what happens. I was traveling a lot at the time, and I didn't have a safe because what was the point? I was constantly renting new places, and it wasn't feasible for me. And I thought my hiding spot was good. My hiding spot wasn't good, and thankfully it was. I wasn't hiding everything there, But so that's kind of what happens too. And you should also understand, if you're getting into metals, you're probably going to lose some eventually, And you should also have in your home a dummy spot where you have a couple ounces of silver or maybe an ounce of gold or a fake one. Go buy a fake one off eBay or something, or Temu, and have that, and that helps also. But it's something that anybody should do. Now, for anybody who's watching this, who's been to my house before and is thinking, oh, Steve's got his safe at his house. I don't have the safe at my house. So that's for some of you who have been here before, and there's been a handful of people I've had at my house. And people who have been here know there ain't no safe at my house either. So it remains to be seen where that safe is. And you got to ask yourself, what if you don't want a safe? Where else are you gonna put it? Are you going to hide it somewhere else? Are you going to hide it? Are you going to bury it, right? Well, I mean, there's things to take into consideration if you're going to bury it, right? Where are you going to bury it? Do you have property? Are you going to bury it on your property? Are you going to bury it somewhere else that's not your property? That's actually the better play, is burying, going on public land somewhere. You got to be quick about it. You got to make sure nobody's looking at you, nobody's watching you. Bury it and make sure you know those exact coordinates, and also hope that the earth doesn't shift, because you got to think about that too. If you're going to bury stuff, whether it be cash or whether it be metals or anything, I mean, what if the plates shift, and what if a sinkhole opens up? I mean, the very low odds of that happening, but it still could happen, right? So it's another thing to think about too. And it's like they say, more money, more problems. right? With cash, more problems. Well, more precious metals, more problems too. Where are you going to stow it? Gold is one thing. You can stow millions of dollars of gold in a small safe. But silver, man, you're gonna need a TL30 safe that's as big as a gun safe. You know how much you're gonna pay for that? 10 grand. 10 grand, easy. So that's the thing. That's why a lot of people eventually do want to exchange their silver into gold, because it's just a lot easier to hold it, a lot easier to hide it. Um, so I don't know. There's a lot of considerations like that. I have a friend who well, I'm not going to say that actually, because they have a very interesting hiding space within their house for their metals, and it's something that nobody would look at. Nobody would even think to look at. So it's interesting. Anyways, I'm going to get out of here. I have things I got to do. But the soft-spoken shaman at gmail.com, the soft-spoken shaman at gmail.com is the place to hit me up. If you want to get into investing in metals, you want to learn more about it, you want to figure out about it, like I said, I've been in the trade for about 17 years. So, I know what I know. If there's stuff I don't know, then hey, that's a blind spot. But I think I know a pretty good amount. And if you want to chop it up, you can always hit me up. And I enjoy shooting the shit about